to another episode of Branding Like a Boss, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the cannabis industry's most talented minds. I'm your host, Angela Pih. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Christina Wong and Wendy Zeng of Mogu Magu. Christina is a culinary cannabis creator, writer, and baked baker in Los Angeles. She's founder and CEO of Fruit and Flower Co. and is the host of Fruit and Flower Unfurled, a newsletter and podcast for food, weed, and travel enthusiasts. Additionally, she's co-host of Mogu Magu, an AAPI culture, food, and cannabis collective. In 2024, Christina is the Emerald Cup judge and also an edibles critic for Buddhist. Now, Chef Wendy is a dynamic presence in the Los Angeles culinary scene, celebrated for her deep connection to Szechuan cuisine and Chinese culture. Born in Chengdu, the heart of Sichuan province, Wendy is raised in the bold, fiery flavors and time-honored techniques and sourcing principles of her homeland. She also came head-to-head with Bobby Flay, which was a really exciting episode, and she should have taken him down. So let's waste no time and jump right in. Hi, Christina and Wendy. So excited to have you on the show.
Hi, Angela.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Of course. I've just been watching you from within your circle and also within the cannabis industry, how amazing it's been in terms of what you've been developing and this whole mythology and legend of Mogu. And would love to learn about that and have you guys give a chance to share that with our audience. So let's jump right in.
Yeah, so Magu is the Taoist hemp goddess of longevity. And, this really started on our group chat, Angela. I don't know if you remember the group text that we had, and Ophelia shared a link, or we were chatting about something, and somebody shared a link about Magu, this deity in Chinese culture, ancient Chinese culture, that was all about celebrating hemp and her as this really powerful, strong, feminine character. And her legend starts with her as a woman, and she was elevated to this deity goddess status for her deeds. And we just, as I think, like, that was the first time that caught on. And I don't know if, Angela, if you remember, we were talking about all these ideas, and we'd get high and we'd eat and we'd cook this beautiful food. Like, you'd cook this Chinese food and we'd hang out, and there were like these salons at your apartment, and it sparked something. And it just, I don't know, I sat with this idea of Magu for a little bit, and then Wendy and I just started hanging out, and bit by bit it all came together and just unlocked.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy to start digging into this Magu figure because I had never heard of her, and I have never really heard of anything that is so rooted in cannabis in Chinese culture like that. And so we were fascinated and hooked immediately. And as we dug more and more, and we kind of started to get the full picture of who this person is and who she represents and what she represents, we just felt more and more kinship and more relatability to even our culture, as being immigrants and children of immigrants. A lot of times, the spaces that we grow up with don't necessarily reflect maybe the spaces that our parents grew up in and the values and the different history that they've experienced. So sometimes we can sometimes feel like we don't even belong in our own culture, or that there's nothing in our own culture that reflects like who we're trying to be. And all of a sudden, this Magu figure gave us purpose in our cannabis exploration, because it led us to find out this wonderful culture about cannabis being part of traditional Chinese medicine. And there's recordings of cannabis being used in ancient China, for all kinds of medicinal illnesses. In fact, cannabis was first discovered in China. The oldest pipes and remains that they dug up and things like that, it's all recorded from Western China. So to have something that is so stigmatized and outlawed in our in current Chinese culture and regime, that dates all the way back to when traditional Chinese medicine was first documented in the Book of Pharmacology, we were just like, wow, the truth is out there. We have to keep uncovering, we have to keep exploring this figure and also reinterpret what that means for us now.
And it was also in the uncovering of Magu, we're like, who is this goddess? What is the story? And what happened was, there's Taoism or Confucianism. Wendy's much better at explaining this point. And, obviously we didn't go with the Taoism. And during the Cultural Revolution, all of the temples that celebrated Magu were destroyed. So there's very little information. There's still a temple that is dedicated to her on Mount Tai, and there's a shrine, and there's like a statue of her in the lake. But piecing together her stories from a modern perspective, and we found that as we were digging around and doing research, a lot of the stories were written by men, some white men. And so looking at the stories and just reinterpreting them for us from a modern, feminine, female forward perspective, and what does she mean to us? And I'll tell you a little, I will give a quick brief overview of like who is Magu, because we have a whole like 90-minute long podcast episode about like the legend of Magu. But she started off as a woman, and she is known to be the protector of women and children. And she forages hemp and flowers and fungus and herbs from the mountain of Mount Tai. And she cooks and brews the elixir of life up in the celestial heavens up in Mount Tai. And she comes down and serves that to men. And so there's multiple stories of Magu that show up throughout Chinese history that are written by Confucius scholars. So if we stitch them all together and we kind of see a picture of her, she's really this independent woman. What I love is that she's not tied to a man. She's not doing this for men or for a husband or for a partner or character. She's doing this to care for her people. And my favorite story about her is the one where she sees an old woman who's hungry on the side of the road. And this was her as her mortal self, not as her goddess self. And she had a peach that somebody had given her, and she gave this old woman the peach so she wouldn't go hungry, and said, I'm going to make you food, wait here. And she ran home to go make this woman some food, and her father saw that he was using their resources and their food to cook for this homeless old woman, and he punished her, beat her, and locked her in her room so she couldn't go out. And so by the time she escaped and was able to go bring the food to the old woman on the side of the street, she was gone, and all that was left was a peach pit. And so she took this peach pit and planted it in the village where she lived, and it grew and tended to it, and it grew into this big, beautiful peach tree that then fed and nourished everyone in that village.
That's so beautiful.
And that simple act is so beautiful. This kindness, this caring for, growing and providing food to protect people, to protect women and children. It's so important, and we really loved that. And then we also looked into it, and we're like, hey, we don't really know a lot, but she's depicted in a lot of different art and artifacts. So we asked our friend, who's an East Asian arts and artifacts expert, to like go through some of this with us and tell us different stories. And that turned into a Magu magic photo exhibit and exhibition, and even more, actually. It's still developing as we go.
That's so powerful, and there's so many themes in there about the immigrant experience as first, second generation Chinese, Asians within the US here. There's the reclamation, there's the piecing together and reclaiming who we are, and finding aspects of our history in what resonates with us, and being able to interpret that for today. And Wendy, I know food is your love language, and it's also your strongest channel of creativity. How does that reclamation, the piecing together um, to interpret, show up in terms of these beautiful experiences that you create in your home?
Well, first it starts more of as a concept. We start planning for the gatherings, and we start thinking about, okay, what does Magu's celestial kitchen even look like?
Yep.
How can we create the scene? So we have all these kinds of florals and mushrooms and all kinds of, really, really fantastical props that we decorate the kitchen with. And then we kind of think about, what are some of the ways that we can put food in these sceneries that have always been healing gatherings, whether it's the holidays when we're uniting with our chosen family, or it's the actual ingredients itself being healing, because so much of our food is based on traditional Chinese medicine principles. And so it's so organic to how we think about putting a meal together, the way that things are balanced. And, I've come to your house, Angela, and you've generously created meals for us. And it's also carrying those kind of principles because it's so ingrained in us. Food is medicine and food is healing. And so is cannabis. It's part of it. And so, we really design the menu towards those themes, towards evoking those emotions, and where cannabis is just kind of the background supporting that, because the culture and the community connection is first and foremost, and that creates even a stronger association, I think, for cannabis being in those scenes and being relevant in those scenes. So it definitely starts there, but as we've been doing it, when it comes to life and the space is filled with people, and I'm in the kitchen, with whether it's cooking with fire or something on the fire walk or all kinds of things, it almost feels like drag. It almost feels like
Mhm.
we're doing drag, because like we're dressed in these outfits. We whether it's everyone puts on their goddess attires. And we also have fashion brands of other young, independent Asian creatives and designers, and who kind of evoke those. Older fashion aesthetics, but bringing this street modern style to it. So there's this visual element, there's fashion elements that make it all together. And so dressed that way, cooking in that kind of celestial kitchen with that kind of intentional menu, I can't help but channel
Mm,
that my
Mhm.
inner Magu, and I kind of think about what it is um to do community healing. Community healing isn't just like group therapy. It's all kinds of experience of emotions that gets evoked throughout these kind of events. One minute we're laughing and eating and smoking blunts together. Next minute we're like crying and sharing some kind of story, about our families and about what's maybe been challenging. So, people experience all kinds of emotions because we're able to create this world and this
Mhm.
visual.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
noticed a lot of symbology in these gatherings that you create. And Christina, the the various interactive stations, I would call them that, and
Mhm.
interactive experiences that you and Wendy put together for these gatherings have so much symbology in them, and just layers of meaning.
Thank you. And but it didn't start that way. What Wendy is describing is what, this year, in the last few months we've done. But all of this started 2.5, almost 3 years ago. Again, sitting in your kitchen. I have such a strong memory of sitting in your living room when you made the silky chicken soup that was just perfect and so fragrant and healing. And, we had just been smoking. I'm so high, I'm so hungry, and I'm drinking this delicious, nourishing soup, and you made this beautiful Hainan chicken. We're sitting around this table with our rad like weed mushroom aunties, and you're like, holy shit, I didn't know I needed a mushroom weed auntie in my life, but I really did. I think for a lot of us, especially if we're cannabis consumers, we live an alternative lifestyle. We don't kind of ascribe to the proper Asian um, framework. We feel a little lost. We don't feel accepted. And finding each other and having a space to celebrate our culture and do these holidays outside of our family with the chosen family is really important. And that's where Mogu Magu came from. Mogu means mushroom.
Yeah.
So Mogu, and then Magu. And even the name Magu is Ma is cannabis, Gu is auntie. So literally, Magu means like weed auntie, technically hemp auntie. Um, And we really take that to heart. And what's happened with Mogu Magu, Wendy and I started hosting events, and then it turned into more events and more gatherings and more projects and creative endeavors based on this idea of like celebrating our cultural holidays with food, with our chosen family, and just talking about our stuff and healing.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned into, we were like, okay, what is Mogu Magu? It's not just events. It's, we're not a brand. We're not trying to sell anything. It's a collective. It's an AAPI, culture, food, and cannabis collective, in that order. And it takes many forms and it takes many shapes. And I think what I really love about this project and how Mogu Magu has evolved is that Wendy and I just check in every year. We're like, all right, what are we going to do? What's important to us? Where do we want to go with this? And are we having fun? And what has evolved is that, like, every single thing that we do is totally different.
Yes.
Every event, every gathering, every project is not like the other. It builds on each other. The community comes together. We see how the community has come together. And I think that also leads us into a fun conversation. I think, Angela, you're an amazing brander. There's this world building, but also, who is this for? You say this a lot, like, who's the community? And the word community gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
But what is creating community actually mean? Who is it for? How are you serving people? And why are they coming? And I think what I love about Mogu Magu is that this is not about sales. Sales is a byproduct. People create relationships and lots of amazing, wonderful things happen, but that is not our intent and that is not our intention. And that's why people love what we do and come to our gatherings.
Yeah, I feel that in the community that you bring together, AAPI communities and also cross-cultural communities. Wendy, sitting
Mhm.
in your garden with such a diverse group of individuals who found their way to each other and have this shared love for cannabis and sharing and feeling nourished by your presence and also, by your food and the beautiful flavors that you create. It's really diverse. I remember one of the gatherings that you had about a year ago where we're really talking about what is social equity, what is representation across cultures and races and gender, and what does that mean to us? So, um, how is that powerful for you, and why that um, that drive?
Oh yeah. So I grew up in Sichuan, which was such a privilege. It's such an amazing foodie culture from that province in China. It's often referred to as the land of plenty because there's so much diverse terroir and landscapes that really produce such an incredible array of different produce and livestock that the people of Sichuan have really grown to innovate around and really love. So, the when you look at the landscape of Chengdu, you see the skyscrapers, but you also see the pagodas and the willow trees and the parks because Sichuan people are so committed to leisure, a life of leisure and beauty and nature. And so that's kind of what we've created with the garden space. It's a farm to table with cannabis concept where people can really feel so safe and this sense of community and connectiveness to the earth when they're here, which lends itself to have some of these tough conversations, some
Yep.
of these topics and things that maybe we've been holding on to because we're not really sure how to express them, how to create the correct, like, discourse to move the narrative forward. So I think that's where, leaving China also and being an American immigrant has exposed me to kind of just this diasporic thinking. I don't really think about things in borders. People have always been diasporic, especially like, you look at some of the Asian collaborators that we partner with who have like Southeast Asian um, backgrounds. And, their people have always been diasporic too. So, really, we shifted the narrative to talk more about how people have moved whether willingly or unwillingly, and how that's created certain asymmetrical power dynamics that plays itself out even in industries and corporations and things like that. So when you start to talk less about borders and countries and nations, and you start more talking about the zoomed out view of how people have always been diasporic and how there's different shared experiences amongst all of us, we start to see the commonalities more clearer, how people have been feeling shame or guilt or grief that have never been properly acknowledged. It's something that so many marginalized folks experience, and so many allies experience too. So they're also drawn to these stories, and it just creates a more fuller picture where of each other, and where we can just feel more seen and we can feel more safe to express and tell our stories.
So
Yeah.
with the food that you create, I know most recently we saw each other at Hall of Flowers, right? Huge community of cannabis enthusiasts. On day two, I think there were 5,000 tickets that were sold to the general public who came in and who were able to experience what is this, cannabis trade show up in Santa Rosa, the brands, the operators, and more importantly, the culinary experience of learning how food and cannabis connect within this cannabis lifestyle within that larger context of farm to table as well with Sonoma Hills Farm. And you and Christina had created this beautiful demonstration, and so many people came up to me and said, "Have you tried those noodles? They were so good." And in a almost a stealth and yummy sort of way, it's kind of like your way of firing an emotion. Well, and I'm sure when you were asked to participate, how did you choose that dish?
Oh man, well, I knew I always want to use these kind of platforms and bring more of my culture and our collective Asian culture to these conversations. So, I was just thinking about, okay, fundamentally, what's like something that really excited me in the beginning of cooking with cannabis, and it's diving into the endocannabinoid system, diving into the science of our receptors and how food and certain spices like Sichuan peppercorn, Sichuan chilies, how they unlock certain parts of those receptors that have really healing and anti-inflammatory benefits, similar to cannabis. In fact, they bind to some of the same receptors. So I think going from an angle where people are already starting to get curious and understand, but then the ingredients we use are so rooted in, Sichuan cooking. And then so that's how we're able to also connect the cultural aspect and like, hey, our people have always been eating like this. We've been experiencing these benefits. We've been experiencing all of this whole time. We just didn't have the verbiage to link it together. So that's what we want to bring is like all of these pointing out, all of these connections that's always been there, how food and how we culturally eat has always been healing that way. So and beyond the healing, it's the yummy flavors, and when I think about Sichuan cuisine, sometimes, I think people can be reductive and write it off as, oh, it's just too spicy, it's going to blow out my palate, but that's not actually good Sichuan cooking. The principles of Sichuan cooking is about thousand layers of flavors. So you're experiencing, oh, immediately there's maybe some flavor, there's some sensations too, because Sichuan peppercorn actually vibrates your taste buds. So it's not just a flavor, it's a sensation you're experiencing. So there's all these levels of aromatics that we infuse the oil in before it even gets used in the sauce, in the noodle sauce. So we're showing how, hey, we're creating these layer flavors of similar terpenes that you find in cannabis, but in these noodles. So it's making this connection to people to one, understand Sichuan culture, of the layer flavors that we come from, and how that's like such an incredible pairing when you're experiencing these really quality flowers that also carry that layer flavor. Everything from aroma to taste and effect, you're feeling like multiple layers.
That's just beautiful.
I
Christina.
really love our gatherings because, and especially now that we've kind of teased out this idea of like Magu celestial kitchen and putting on our goddess, like, Wendy puts on her inner Magu, and we did this beautiful photo shoot last year, where we imagined ourselves as modern Magus and what that would look like. And and you helped to style, Angela, that really made all the difference, those little touches and these right modern streetwear paired with like these ancient Chinese tropes and looks and styles and fabrics and brocades. And Wendy's photography series was like Magu the chef. And you
Yeah.
see her cooking with colored smoke bombs. And now we get to bring that photo shoot and that idea to life in her kitchen, in her secret garden space, in her outdoor kitchen. And I love how our Mogu Magu gatherings have given Wendy this really fun, creative runway to just be imaginative. And I feel like some of the food that you're cooking right now, Wendy, is just so thoughtful and I mean, not only delicious, but really taps into traditional cooking and modern cuisine with farm to table. And it's so exciting. And, when we look at this, we think, like we're all Chinese. And I think, Wendy's talking about Sichuan style cooking. And that was one of the pitfalls that Wendy and I noticed about our events when we first started. We started with like a Lunar New Year, and then we did Mid-Autumn Moon Festival, and we are thinking about all these other holidays we wanted to celebrate. And there was this moment where it was like, wait a second, we are forgetting about the other A's and the P's and the I's in the AAPI. We're only thinking about our Chinese cultures because that's all we know. That's the only context that I personally have. And so I asked myself, I was like, how can I be better? And that kind of started a spark of an idea that has really created this model that we use for our gatherings, where we're like, you know what, like I would like to learn more about other cultures and traditions and holidays in the AAPI diaspora. But I'm obviously not the expert to talk about it, and neither is Wendy. And so we started doing like the co-host model and a collaborator. So we now, for almost every gathering, we invite a fellow modern Magu in our community, someone we know, someone who's doing cool things for their community and their space, to co-host an event with us. And so we did one that was a Panay party with Gigi, Geraldine Maycueva, who is absolutely amazing. And she's like the ultimate, like, weed tita, like she's just this auntie of the Filipino culture. And it made so much sense for her to be the voice, the co-host, to share that. And we invited Chef Ria Dolly Barbosa to come in and make lumpia, because like the way that she makes lumpia is a little bit different than the way Wendy makes it. And it opened up this beautiful conversation. We also got to invite Mei Li Tao, who's the donut princess. If you've seen the Donut King documentary, she's featured in there. She's one of the donut shop kids. Her mom and her parents fled Cambodia during the war and moved to the States, opened a donut shop in Southern California, and that's how they survived and thrived and made a life for themselves here. And her story was so moving. Like that event was, I carry it with me a lot, because she talks about how, her mom's imperfect and there's all these things, but like she forgives her because of the unbelievable hardships that her ancestors, her family, her parents had to go through to get her here, for them to have this life. And like, instead of us, I think for Asian American immigrant kids, like we carry that guilt a lot, this intergenerational guilt, and like feeling like we need to do something in a certain way, or we owe that, and carrying that. But like we did this beautiful paper burning ceremony at the event with Meili, and like just wasn't planned, but it just happened. And there was this moment where like lighting the joss papers and sending messages to Magu and our ancestors. And I said, like say thank you, appreciate it, send your ancestors the gifts and the spirit money, and let that shit go.
Yeah.
And like it hit me in the chest so hard, and like that was such a healing moment for me. Like my life has been different since that. And I like tell the story. And then we did the similar paper burning ceremony at another event, and I told the story about my grandma and like saying that and letting it go. And this other woman who came in, she was her first time at one of our events. I'd never met her before, but she came forward and she was just like crying and telling about her grandma. And like it's just the healing, it ripples. it happens, but like it takes a while for us to process and then carry on. And then like these lessons just kind of keep going on and like building on traditions for each event.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
as women,
And I
we
think,
carry all of that intergenerationally, and because we tend to be the story keepers. And as part of that, all of the layers of um, missed expectations, false promises, and enduring. There's so much resilience in our culture, and because that's what's expected of us. And let's speak more about that emotion, because Christina, we haven't really talked about your baking with cannabis very much since we started this conversation. Um, each each one of your baked creations have an emotional purpose. It achieves something for you. And I'm not sure the audience are really aware of your baked creations with cannabis.
Yeah, that's kind of where I started. I was a baked baker, and that was the beginning of the storytelling journey. And, just like Wendy weaves stories and beautiful tales with her cooking and her food, I make these beautiful desserts that are often cannabis infused or cannabis inspired. And they're not always infused. A lot of times they aren't. They just show up at the events, but they tell this beautiful story. One of my favorite ones that I made was recently at the Blunt. We did egg blunts and egg rolls. That was such a fun event. And it was learning how to roll blunts and roll egg rolls in the same way with our Black friends in the industry. And I learned so much. That was such a learning experience. But I made this beautiful dessert that was a banana pudding cake roll, like those like Swiss cake rolls with the spongy.
Yeah, we see them
um,
all in Asian bakeries.
Exactly. So I wanted to do something like that, but like, I mean, and it's so hard, like getting that texture and the cream and all of it. You want it to be light and not too sweet and all these things. So I made a banana pudding like cake roll, and then I topped it with meringue, and it was really spiky. And then and then Wendy had a huge ass culinary torch, and she was like, "Can we light it on fire?" And I was like, "Yes, we can." So I made this dessert so that she could I mostly made this dessert with the meringue so that she could torch it and light it on fire. Um, but I think what I really loved about it was the symbolism, and sometimes I make it and I didn't know that this was what the story that was going to come out. But when it happened and we were lighting the torch and torching it and serving it, what I realized about this banana pudding cake roll with the torched meringue was that it was a representation of, right, like you've got this yellow cake. It was a very banana cake, it was very yellow. And then we've got banana pudding folded inside. You've got very Southern, you got a very Asian type style dessert. There's a lot of cross cultural references here.
Yeah.
But you've got this yellow wrapped in white, right? There's a definite proximity to whiteness in the Asian culture that is really challenging, that Wendy and I talk about a lot. We talk about the patriarchy, we talk about systematic racism. And at this particular event, it's like, yeah, like the systematic racism and patriarchy is really what is pitting our communities against each other. And we
Yeah.
started talking about them. Why? Why do we act this way? How do we change that? How do we change it within ourselves? And this dessert told that story. You see this yellow cake folded and wrapped into the white, and it's topped with the meringue. And Wendy takes this torch, and we're literally torching this patriarchy, right? We're lighting this on fire to be able and slicing it and eating it and taking that in. And that storytelling, that symbolism of taking in something and eating it and swallowing that and eating that with your community to be able to create change is really
Well,
beautiful.
in Zen Buddhism, when we're taught about enlightenment, it's not about knowledge, it's about an experiential insight. When we consume something, it's an actual direct physical experience that we're able to enter and glean an insight for ourselves that's so personal. So when you and Wendy choose food as the way in, and like what Wendy was talking about, like it literally dances on the tongue,
Mm-hmm.
the Szechuan peppers and the sweetness, but the symbology of the cake. So all of those aspects of this Zen aspect of entering your own insight through through a physical experience is very, very
Mhm.
powerful. I know recently you took a long trip all the way up to visit Tina at Moonmade Farms. Is, I guess, hopefully a beginning of a travel log, right, through cannabis journeys. And that's another channel where you're creating cannabis experiences and sharing that with us.
That
Yeah,
was a
so
transformative trip.
yeah, I was gonna say in the beginning of this year, we have been feeling so much love and momentum from the gatherings. And January 1st, we met for a little intention setting meeting. And what we talked about is, hey, beyond the physical gatherings that we do in LA, how do we expand this? Because our mission is always to amplify and, push the narrative forward. And what better way to do that than media, than
Mhm.
creating media and storytelling? I think the co-hosting model also
Mhm.
helps because we want to have these conversations extend beyond cannabis.
Mhm.
So because when we talk to our industry friends, we can go so deep and so nuanced. But then when I talk to my non-industry friends who are, just interested consumers, they have no idea any of this is going on. They don't know the discourse, sun grown versus indoor versus all these different factors and options that you have as a consumer, and how can you be more conscious about it. And so our mission this year has always been about how do we create more stories and narrative and media to expand our reach and reach new people who don't work in the industry, who aren't just like following the industry news. How do we break beyond that echo chamber, and get more people thinking about it, even as a social issue, because even if you don't consume, you should know what's going on with
Sure.
cannabis, with legislation, with practices, with farming practices, with manufacturing practices, with what's going into people's bodies. So, um, in the spirit of Magu, we set out to visit Tina, and because Christina had gone up in Humboldt and visited a couple farms before, but I hadn't. So I was like, "You need to take me, and let's go on this trip." And at first, it was just going to be, us taking a road trip. But then we were like, "Oh, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to showcase the wonderful expression, diverse expressions too, of the intersection of culinary and cannabis throughout just even the sun-grown scene in California."
Yeah, this road trip turned into a sponsored travel docu-series, honestly.
With pop-up dinners at every farm.
yeah, this was, I mean, overachieving stoner Asian to the max was what happened. Like, we're like, yeah, let's go on this fun road trip. It'll be great. And then I was like, okay, let me map out like how, like, all of this was in pursuit of going to visit our friend Tina Gordon at Moonmade Farms. She's up in Southern Humboldt, and and she's so spectacular, not only in the way that she grows and who she is, but
Goddess.
she is. I mean, she is truly, she's one of the very few Asian women cannabis farmers in Humboldt doing what she does and the way she does it. And she has always been so generous with us. She is our main flower sponsor and storyteller. Like and every time we talk to Tina, I'm like, she is Magu. The
Mhm.
words of Magu flow, like that energy, that spirit, the words, the things she says are just straight Magu. And we're like, holy shit. Like, we need to go do this trip and go visit her farm, because she always comes down to LA and it's so far away. It's like a 9-hour drive. Like, she always comes to us. We're like, let's go to Humboldt, let's go visit Moonmade Farms and go find our modern Magu. And that idea, that premise turned into this travel docu-series called In Search of Magu.
Oh,
So it starts with this 10-day road trip that in Oakland. And then we mapped out, I'm like, all right, in order for us to get from point A to point B and back with the least amount of pain and maximum fun, how do we do this? And so it turned into like, okay, we started in Oakland. We visited our friends Hedgen. We were supposed to meet up and cook for Hedgen and Monica Lowe, Sue Weed, who are other badass Asian women in this cannabis space. But then, they ended up getting sick and not able to. So, plans changed. And then Wendy cooked a chicken, a really nourishing, healing chicken soup for them, and we drove around and dropped it off to them. And like that was so beautiful. And we have all of this on tape. Wendy's husband Wes was like, okay, like I want to film this. I've never shot or edited this before, but like let's do it. And so we did. We packed up their Tesla. Wendy was like, I want to be able to cook a meal for all of our hosts. So like as I was setting up this trip, I'm like, all right, where are we going to stay? We're all weed rich and cash poor. How do we make this work? And so it's just hitting up all of our friends and these relationships we've built over the years. And so we're like, all right, we have a stay here in Oakland in the Bay Area. And then we stopped at Sonoma Hills Farm up in Petaluma. And then from there, we kind of road tripped and stopped at Heritage Mendocino to see how hash was made. Stopped at a couple other places along the way. Finally made it up to Moon Maid, looked at Heartwood Sanctuary, where like this idea of like a Magu retreat was born. So next year we want to do like a
Yes.
Mogu Magu retreat up in Humboldt, which is going to be amazing. Actually, I'm so excited about it. And then from there, we came back down. We got to stay at the Bohemian Chemist, who are like, right, if you thought you needed rad mushroom weed aunties, what you really need are like weed gunkles, because they're the shit. They were like just staying at their place, and the hospitality and chatting with them and seeing what they're doing was so beautiful. And like, right, you're like, we need weed gunkles, we need weed aunties and motatillas. It's so important for us. And then we went from there and we drove out to Fresno to go visit our friend Sue, who's the ranchera mommy. And we got to see how seeds were done. And she's also a Magu in her own right, but she's the Motatia version of a Magu. And these stories just came up. And so when we packed the car, Wendy packed up their Tesla with a traveling kitchen and ingredients from her garden and sauces and things that she made that were like, and there's like kind of a continuity for all the dishes. But at every single place that we stayed, where they hosted us, where we got to stay overnight at these beautiful weed farms, when we cooked them a meal. And each place was different. It had a different vibe, but that sparked a whole other idea for a cookbook that we're also really excited to do, that came together really quickly. And we actually have an amazing food stylist and photographer who's going to do it. But Wendy, I'll let you talk about all the food that you cooked on this travel series.
Oh, it was so much fun. It was bringing that Mogu Magu farm to table and make it Asian. I think it's like the best way to describe it.
Yeah. It was like, how do
So,
we take what we do at the Mogu Magu gatherings in Wendy's backyard and like bring it to somewhere else and make this? Because people will ask us, like, will you bring Mogu Magu to my city? Chicago, New York, DC, Boston. Everybody wants us to come do this. But we're like, all right, how do we do this? So, like,
yeah, but you
that
can't
was the
really
impetus.
completely replicate what we do in LA because it's LA. It's very LA vibes.
Yeah.
So wherever we go, it needs to have a Mogu Magu flavor, but still reflect where we're going. At Sonoma Hill Farms, for example, we arrived at like 11 p.m. at night, and I thought we were like gonna interrupt the host. No, Mike and Shauna met us with open arms and wine and took us on the golf cart, and we went raiding the meat seller because they raise incredible cows and pigs and chickens, all kinds of cool livestock. So we were just, romping around the farm, smoking joints, drinking wine, and picking out like, different types of organic meats from their farm. And then the next morning, we woke up, got some coffee and weed, and was walking the garden and picking out what we wanted. And so we made
Like
this.
literally Shauna with a shovel digging up carrots for us. Like,
It was incredible. And so we made things like, like I made a panzanella salad with their local sourdough and some of the sausages, three different sausages made from their pigs, some hot links, some andouille, I think a hot Italian. But then I also brought Taiwanese sausage. And it was super, super legit ones that my mother-in-law only gets through some secret WeChat group. And and so it's like really, really legit Taiwanese sausage. And then, different stone fruits from our garden and their garden. And so just kind of this mix of very Asian flavors, but in farm to table type of dishes. The garlic noodle, the spicy garlic noodles definitely made a scene there. That's why they invited me back to do the demo.
Yeah, they
Uh,
were like, "Can you just do what you did? Like, can you just do a Mogu Magu on stage?" We're like, "Let's see what we can figure out."
Yeah, and the for the spicy garlic noodles, the ground pork was also made from their pigs. So it's like using their ingredients, but making these very traditional Asian dishes. We had like lemongrass skewer chicken. They had a huge fire cooking situation. It's so big, this giant grill, very legit. So I got to play with that. Love building fire and playing with fire. So it
So
was just such a chef's wonderland.
Yeah,
They're
even the
very
dessert.
culinary oriented.
Even the dessert we made for them was just so inspired and thoughtful. It's one of my favorites. So, like, our friends at Kiva Lost Farm were so kind to sponsor the meal and part of our trip here. So, and they joined us for that lunch at Sonoma Hills Farm. And so we wanted to make a dessert or make something that would, thank them, show them appreciation and honor, like what they're doing. Because I love what the brand is doing and their flavors. And so Lost Farm is all about like the spirit of exploration and exotic flavors and like strain specific experiences. And so Wendy makes this really beautiful like ayu jelly like dessert. And like I didn't know what ayu jelly was. That's not something I would ever pick up at the Asian grocery store because I am so limited in my Americanness. Like I don't know, so I wouldn't buy it. But so Wendy introduced it to me and she's like, okay, we're gonna do this ayu jelly salad with like layered fruit. And we literally like we bought some like exotic fruits from 99 Ranch on our way up there. And like the idea was like, okay, if we were to make this dessert inspired by Lost Farm, what would the exotic flavors of Mogu Magu feel like, taste like, look like? And so there was dragon fruit, there was papaya. We had Sean at Sonoma Hills Farm. They had like fresh like honeydew melon juice and watermelon juice. So we layered in like cherries and peaches and dragon fruits, and we had like sliced papaya, and we layered that into these really beautiful like translucent layers of like jelly, and then we served that with this beautiful weed leaf, and it was so pretty. It was like a jelly trifle, like a
wow.
jelly
Yeah.
fruit trifle
And
is the best way to describe it.
And IU jelly, for those who have not heard of it, it's actually really cool. So, and it's totally vegan. I know a lot of people don't want to use collagen from animals. IU jelly is a great substitute. IU jelly is actually made from soaking this very specific Taiwanese fig. The seeds of this Taiwanese fig tree has this kind of gelatin
It's like all the
attitude.
pectin.
Yeah, and then you just
Mhm.
soak it in water, and then that water, that liquid, whatever you soak it in, becomes Jello. And it's got like, I think a better mouthfeel, honestly, than like regular Jello. It's got this
Mhm.
like chew to it. It's really, really, really refreshing. And I just love it. And the name is so cute. IU means love jade. So it's named after the
Aw.
the daughter of the person who discovered it.
Oh, that's so yummy. Yeah, and like this jelly was like right, it's like this idea of like these chews and these gummies, interpreted in an Asian form, with these flavors. And like they had just dropped these new flavors that was like dragon fruit with chopped cherry. There was like a dark cherry, like Illuminati. So like all like the whole dessert was meant to like celebrate these new flavor launches. And then the magic on top of that, which is why like I love collaborations because you can create things that you couldn't possibly do on your own. And so we had this jelly, and that's what we were going to serve for dessert. And then Joyce from Sonoma Hills Farms is like, I have a big gallon of Pink Jesus ice cream. We're like, fuck yeah, bring that. And so, we were looking at this and we're like, yo, let's make like a jelly float or like a jelly fagotto. So this idea of like, those like in like the bubble tea
Yep.
places in Taiwan, they do like jelly drinks, like a boba drink, but with jelly. So we're like, okay, we have this jelly dessert. And then like I think about, like the scoop of ice cream, like an ice cream float, but it's a jelly drink. So we're like, all right, let's put the scoop of Pink Jesus ice cream on top of it. And then, like the Pink Jesus ice cream was made from Humphrey Slocum, inspired by the Sonoma Hills Pink Jesus strain. So the flavors of it is like a raspberry rose with like a lavender caramel ripple. So
But
it's a unique flavor.
savory.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really floral and sweet. And so when you put the scoop of ice cream into the jelly and you watch like the ice cream just kind of like melt and goo in through like like the little jelly ribbons, and like when people ate it, like it was just this, everybody was like, what is this? And it was such a beautiful collaboration dessert.
Well,
Um,
it's such a beautiful story because it really brings together everything that we've talked about bringing our cultures, our stories, the symbology of it, and within where we are now, in California, in the U.S., where cannabis is legal, and we're able to share these wonderful experiences through food, through our love, and bring it together with other
mhm.
cultures and other practices. And so
Yeah,
I really commend you both for just being amazing creators of both experiences and foods and friendships. And I really really cherish you both, and I'm so
thank you.
happy that you
Thank
guys
Thank
you.
you. I
now.
Yeah.
mean, selfishly, we do it for ourselves too, because as much as, it's so rewarding to connect people within the community with each other. And I think that's the true meaning of community. It's not one way between people and us, it's how do we facilitate people connecting with each other. And
Well,
as much as that's so amazing, we do it for us because I met Christina at a time where I really needed a chosen family. I really needed healing, collective healing. And, we were just eating and smoking, crying, talking, laughing together. And we were like, how do we bring this healing that we have in our friendship to our community and beyond?
yeah.
And so every time we do it, even though we're the organizers of it, as the gatherings start or as the creative endeavor starts to unfold, we're always, I think we try to practice surrender to whatever the outcome's going to be. We're not trying to force it to one particular outcome. And it always shocks us, it always surprises us. We always learn something.
Mhm,
And is because people come to contribute to the magic. And
mhm.
it's so touching and so magical to watch it unfold and just kind of let go and let the community um, also contribute and participate and turn it into something, that we can
Yeah.
all share.
How
Yeah,
can
and there's so many Asians in this cannabis
absolutely
space. It's so, people are like, oh, there aren't any Asians. Like, actually, there's quite a lot. There's quite a few of us doing amazing things, doing amazing work in the space, very creative, very innovative, visionary, forward thinking. And I think, like we first gathered at Ophelia's Potluck Club, which was networking. And that event is
was
what made this,
yeah.
because that was the first time I got to meet all of the other Asians in
There
this
was
cannabis
100 of
space.
us at one gathering, still in the latter stages of the pandemic,
Yeah.
but seeing ourselves represented within the community
Hmm.
across all types of operators and brands within cannabis as a collective of Asians.
I know, I
Yeah.
was like crying. I was like, I'm at a networking event. Why am I crying? But
But
it was
it's
just so emotional. You get so moved by it, and you can see other people moved by it. You feel the energy, you know? I know I wasn't the only one tearing up.
You
but
have
it's
smiling through all of it just to see all of us together.
I mean, and it's so nice to see, like, again, like our culture reflected in this space. And I think, Wendy's food, my desserts, our friends who make the moon cakes. The first time I saw that, I was like, what? There's cannabis infused moon cakes? Like, that just blows my mind. And what Sunday school is doing and how they celebrate their Korean culture and heritage and amplify it in that way. And the way Potly takes these like Asian flavors and brings that out. I just think it's so important. And what I love about this space and this community that we have is like it's really not competition. We are all here celebrating each other, giving each other space, and that is really I'm so proud of that because and we try to bring that into the Mogu Magu gatherings as well as like we invite and we curate these events and these experiences to people to amplify what these people in our community are doing and so that others can meet them and celebrate them. Like at the last event we just did to celebrate Mid Autumn Moon Festival, We did a mahjong tea garden, and this idea has been in my mind for at least 2-3 years. I think at the very first hot pot event that we did, I was like, dude, wouldn't it be cool? I think even in your living room, I think I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could like have a weed like mahjong game? Like we'd be all playing mahjong but smoking weed. And we're like, all right, who knows how to play mahjong?
No one.
We're bad Asians.
You
And
know,
so
we were like the first generation to say, okay, no more gambling, and just a simple.
but it took, or like that inception, that seed of an idea, it took this long. It took the patience for us to wait for the right person and the right co-host to be able to bring that idea to life. And I think what I'm loving with what we're doing, and that like we have yet to even release and share a lot of the media and the content and the photography that we've been taking from these events, because we're just two people trying to make it all work. And it's
I think
you
that's
know
I think that's really a perfect way for to really kind of like whet the appetite for
Mhm.
what's to come.
Yeah.
You
But
know,
it's
forward
seeing like
months,
this
and we
imagery.
absolutely will. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think it's really important for this imagery to be created. And I think that's what Ophelia, what Ophelia did with stockpot images is really what inspired this as well. And I said,
Beautiful.
like
The one
I
who
think
brought us all together.
yeah, and I think, seeing cannabis as a healing medicine with people who look like us, celebrating what's familiar in our cultural holidays with
Yep.
mooncakes, with mahjong, in a positive light, not in this evil, horrible, drug peddling light, is important because that's going to start to change perceptions. Our friends who wrote the cannabis education guide that's translated into 11 different AAPI languages, that has been an essential tool at all of our events. When we tell people that this exists, when people get a hands on the copy of this book and they share it with their friends, or they share it with their family, it changes perceptions. Like I gave it to my dad and then my mom, and like for them to be able to read and learn about cannabis in their own language to understand it was huge. Colleen took the book and gave it to one of her friends who's Taiwanese. She brought it to Taiwan, gave it to her mom and her uncle for them to read. So that book has now traveled to Taiwan for them to learn information. And it's just like,
That's so moving, and in a way, like you were saying, it's around changing perception of
mhm,
cannabis, which is, part of our mission as well, in terms of changing and correcting the stigma, and what we do in terms of our approach to educate, to create different experiences, to enjoy cannabis. And um, a lot of what we do here in terms of, branding like a boss is really to uncover and give a platform for these stories to be told.
mhm.
So, what's the best way that our audience can reach out to you and find you?
You can find us on mogumagu.la. That's on Instagram as well as our website. And you can sign up for our newsletter where you can keep up with all of the amazing projects that we're working on. And we really hope to see more new faces at the next gathering.
Yeah, so it's on Instagram, Mogu Magu, MOGUMAGU.LA. And our website is mogumagu.co for our collective. And that's where you'll get our email list. If you want to get invitations to our gathering, sign up for the email list. We also list events. You can see photos and recaps and link out there. And especially our Mogu Magu project, we have a call for artists. We're doing a project to create new works of art for depicting Magu. And you can find Wendy on Instagram at Chef Wendy Z. And you can find me on Instagram at Fruit and Flower, all spelled out one word. But I also wanted to mention too, this is branding like a boss, and we are all marketers and branding here. And Angela, you are the brand whisperer and expert in this. And as like I said, like what I love about Mogu Magu is like it's taken a lot of time to get here. I think we wanted to do a branding thing, we tried to, and it took a while. And I think allowing the idea and the community to tell us and help us grow it into what it is. And so when Wendy and I sat down for our kind of session earlier this year, we really sat down. We're like, what is the why, how, and what of Mogu Magu? And what we arrived at with our why was like, our why is healing ourselves and each other through plant medicine.
Love that.
And how we do it is through these gatherings, through these events, through the content and the media and the things that we do. And what are we is that we are an AAPI Culture, Food, and Cannabis Collective.
Love it. Thank you so much for being on episode 3 with me, and I'm sure the audiences are going to learn.
Oh, I think I lost the sound.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for having us, Angela.
Thanks
we
for
so
having
love this
us.
conversation.
Thank you. Can't wait for it to share it.